So let's talk to us more about the why for Jacksonville. We've talked about Jacksonville before a little bit, Greg, and interestingly, it's one of the very few markets that's on a United States coast where you're still not hemorrhaging cash flow on a monthly basis. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm sure most folks would expect, me investing my own money in Jacksonville, I love it because it is that balance of positive cash flow and potential for home price appreciation. And a lot of this comes back to population growth. So, when we're talking about why Jacksonville is appreciating at a rate that is almost twice what Cleveland is appreciating, it's because population is growing there, right? If you look from 1990 to 2017, I pulled the data, and population in Jacksonville has appreciated 40%.
That's astounding. And that's even more than Dallas at 33% over that time period.
There you go. Well, and you compare that to what's going on in some of the other markets, they don't compare. Many times population has decreased in some of these major markets out there, Cleveland being one of them. And so this idea of home price appreciation is not such a mythical fact anymore. When you look at historical home price appreciation and you look at where populations are growing, you can count on home price appreciation, assuming you are a long-term investor. And that's really why I love Jacksonville, right? We're able to cross that threshold of cash flow, and then we set ourselves up for success, additional success on the home price appreciation front. And then if you really want to take it to another level, you look at the benefits of leverage on top of that.
Now, if you do want to have a reasonable expectation of long-term home price appreciation, sure, in-migration exceeding out-migration certainly helps, like the 40% population increase in Jacksonville between 1990 and 2017. But talk to us about some of the strong economic fundamentals there in Jacksonville, which is positioned in Northeast Florida, because, I think a lot of people, when they think about Florida, they think about an influx of retirees, and they're certainly right. But in Jacksonville, unlike other places in Florida, they're not as dependent on the retiree influx as they are other industries. So tell us about some of those economic drivers in Jacksonville.
You're right. We are not dependent nearly as much on the retirees, and we're not dependent nearly as much on the tourism. We joke that Jacksonville is a lot more like Southern Georgia than it is many of the other key
Right.
markets in Florida. It is extremely different than Miami and very different than Orlando. Our number one employer is the military. We are a large logistics town. Shipping is very important for us. We have 3 Fortune 500 companies that are here, but tourism and retirees are not the biggest driver of our economy. A lot of these stable economic anchors are really what drive us. And one of them being the port of Jacksonville. I think that's something that we talked about on the first podcast you had me on. A couple of years ago. You remember that, Keith?
Yeah, that's right.
Our port is such a driver of our economic base. We're the second largest port in the state where we are right now. Obviously, it's a big driver of jobs. But the really exciting thing is what has been going on for years. And this is in a relationship to what happened with the Panama Canal. And as they expanded the Panama Canal, larger ships were able to pass through. And so all of the ports along the eastern seaboard saw the potential for this huge demand of container ships coming through. And so each of the ports along the eastern seaboard have done certain things to be able to capture that demand, and Jacksonville's been right there. So we're really excited, not just about what the port does today, but what that can mean for our economic base and what that can mean for jobs and growth, specifically of real estate, over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
Most any substantial metro area has a Fortune 500 company presence, but you actually have 3 Fortune 500 companies headquartered there: Fidelity National Information Services, Fidelity National Financial, and CSX. And the population growth there in Jacksonville, I know Jacksonville's grown a complete 2% just in the last year alone, one of the fastest growing populations in the country. And to put that in perspective, the United States lately has had a growth rate of 0.6 to 0.7% in population annually. So Jacksonville's growth rate in the last year has been 3 times the nation's growth rate.
There you go. We're over 1.5 million people now. They just released this stat, a few weeks ago now, and I was surprised. 2% in 1 year for a major city like Jacksonville, that's substantial. So certainly excited about the continued booming population here.